Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Saturday recap. Here for the looking back on what was a very exciting day at the Hungarian for Grand Prix Saturday at the Hungarian. Sorry for the slight delay. I had a few technical issues which resulted in a delay. But I'm up and running now. Everything is all sorted. And let's talk about all the action that we saw today. Firstly, starting with the Formula 1, the qualifying session which took place today, which saw a few surprises. But first, let's start off with third practice and the background. It was the big story of practice 3 was the fact that Red Bull seemed to be really struggling for pace. The car just looks like a handful. There is a good car in that Red Bull. They just don't seem to know how to work it so far. And that has really translated to some real struggles that we saw in practice 3. Whilst Mercedes and Racing Point looked on top form, as you can see from the order, it was with Bottas leading the way from Hamilton. Ferrari looked better, although it is a higher downforce track, which might suit the Ferrari a bit more. But now let's talk about qualifying. So, we all started with Q1, and we did see some interesting results in the end. Now, here we have the qualifying result. Alfa Romeo, firstly, a massive struggle for them, lining up on the back row, and 4 of the 5 cars that went out were Ferrari power. That engine clearly has some problems. It seems that the FIA clampdown has really affected them. They are joined, Kevin Magnussen, Grosjean, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen are joined in the bottom 5 by Danny Kvyat. But the big story of that session was Williams. Both cars making it into Q2. And I honestly believe that Williams are at least on par with Haas and Alfa now. In fact, in some ways, in qualifying, they are ahead. It was a really good effort, and there were some people speculating whether George Russell could even make it into Q3, which he didn't quite manage in the end. Unfortunately, it would have been good to see, but it didn't quite manage. He didn't quite manage yet. But out of Q2, disappointing qualifying for Renault. Ricciardo starts in 11th ahead of George Russell. But the other big story, Alexander Albon. That car did look like a right handful in this session, and he just could not get much about it. He complained that he was put out in traffic, and he was also complaining about understeer. He looked so dejected in literally all of his interviews. He looked so dejected, and he was clearly angry at himself in some ways as well. But a real issue that we have with the Red Bull program, with Red Bull, is their philosophy of getting right behind Verstappen. It's not working. I do really think they need to do more to support their second driver. I mean, Alex Albon and also Pierre Gasly as well, from last year, they're both very fast drivers. I'm not saying that Alex Albon is going to be like Pierre Gasly yet. It's way too early to say that. But they just don't seem to have the motivation that Verstappen has, and it's up to the team to give them that motivation. We saw as soon as Gasly got back into that Toro Rosso, back into an environment that suited him, he was very, very fast. He regained the form that was why Red Bull chose him in the first place. So they just need to do something to motivate their second driver. Something more to give their second driver more motivation. But he was obviously very disappointed qualifying for Renault to get neither car into Q3. Racing Point did take a real risk in that session, and the fact that both cars got through on the medium tyre does show that that car has a lot of pace. So now let's talk about Q3. And it was a very interesting midfield battle. Obviously, with Mercedes best way ahead of everyone else. But Pierre Gasly had to commend his effort despite engine issues, qualifying in 10th. He didn't go out in Q3 because of those issues, but to qualify in 10th despite his engine not working as it should, very valiant effort. McLaren, I think, will be slightly disappointed with 8th and 9th. Then you have Max Verstappen, as I said, a real struggle for Red Bull. A massive struggle. He will start in 7th. They were expecting a lot more this weekend, but they just don't seem to have the understanding of the car for this race, and it just doesn't seem to be working that well. I mean, he's behind the two Ferraris, who will be probably quite pleased with 5th and 6th in the end. But then you have the big story of the day, Racing Point, looking out the second row, and some even suggesting they could challenge Mercedes for pole. I don't think that was ever going to happen. But being best of the rest in 3rd and 4th, a very good effort from them. And then, of course, you had the battle between the two Mercedes. And Lewis Hamilton once again was in top form. He got his 90th pole position, and he is entering uncharted territory. And I really could see him getting to at least 100 plus poles. In fact, I think that there is actually a really good chance of that. He has the records in his, so he's just going to try to extend it. But what a job from Mercedes. That car is very fast. I actually did say it before. Every year going into a new season, it's like everyone's like, who's going to topple Mercedes? If anyone's going to? Is anyone going to top? Surely Red Bull and Ferrari are going to close the gap massively. But forgetting that Mercedes would likely have something up their sleeve, and then they just turn up with something utterly special. And some people may see it as boring, but Mercedes are just simply better than everyone else right now, and they have been since the start of the hybrid era. They're just better in terms of developing a car, understanding a car, and operationally as well. So you have to accept that they are simply the best team at the moment. But now, once we have talked about qualifying, I'll be going back onto qualifying later. But now let's talk about the support races which took place today. Let's have a look at the support races which took place today. Also, I forgot to change the slideshow. But this is the qualifying slideshow. The support races that happened today. And firstly, I will be starting with the Formula 3, which saw a chaotic race, to say the least. So, the race got underway, and it was Alexander Smolia on pole position after a really valiant effort in qualifying. But as you can see, things did not go to plan for him at the first corner. He got a very good start, went into the first corner, but Logan Sargent behind lost it and basically harpooned him into a spin, and that was his race over on the spot. Well, he did go back to the pits, but that was his race over. And you had to feel for him. He did all that. Alexander Smolia, he did all that work in qualifying yesterday. He did all that work, and he drove so well. He was set for a breakthrough drive, because I believe that he could have easily held everyone off. But then all his weekend work, he found himself in his weekend work getting trashed at the first corner by someone else's mistake. Completely 0% his fault. And I was surprised that Logan Sargent did not get a penalty for it. I mean, yes, it was an honest mistake, but still, it was his mistake. So he should be held responsible, obviously. And there was a chain reaction. Then you saw where you had Caelan Williams colliding with Frederick Vesti. Very bad for Vesti's championship. Whilst Caldwell got caught up in the melee as well. So it was a very chaotic start. And obviously the safety car came out. It came in. But then this happened. Liam Lawson, his engine failed and he dumped oil all over the track, which actually caused quite a fire at the back as well. But that didn't just bring out the safety car again, it actually brought out the red flag because they needed to clean up the oil, which was no surprise that they actually had to do that. So the race was stopped for around 20 to 30 minutes, I'd say around that time, as they put cement dust on. Respect to the marshals for everything that they did to get that race back underway. And it got back underway. Teo Porcher was leading. As you can see, Enzo Fittipaldi was making moves, but then he dropped back because of a penalty for a red flag infringement. But Porcher then disappeared off. He was in command of the race. He was under pressure from Piastri before the red flag, but after the red flag, he was off. Whilst the MP Motorsport, two of the MP Motorsport cars, Richard Verschoor, Bent Viscal, were fighting their way through the field. You see Bent Viscal made a real ambitious lunge, really sending it down the inside of Sebastian Fernandez. And then Bent Viscal managed to get past as well. Fernandez did end up struggling. And then Bent Viscal managed to get round the outside of Verschoor. But it was Teo Porcher that won the race in the end. Took a well-deserved win, and he is getting himself into this title fight. Oscar Piastri finished in second, and Logan Sargent did originally finish in third, but he actually got a time penalty, surprisingly not for the incident in question. But he actually got penalised for overtaking Liam Lawson off the track. And that meant that he dropped to sixth, promoting Bent Viscal to his first ever Formula 3 podium. Richard Verschoor finishes in fourth. That is Fernandez, Sargent, Peroni, Hauger, Novalak, and Beckman. Futrell had a disappointing race. Dunner finished in 12th. Then it was Malvestiti, Ahmed, Fraga, Schumacher, Das Flert, Fittipaldi, who dropped to 19th after his penalty. Deleta, Caldwell, Nannini, Stanek, and Hughes had a miserable race. Zendelli retired after contact with Jack Doohan. And this was before the red flag. Obviously, Lawson retired with his failure. Smollier retired at the end of the first lap after the contact, and Vesti and Williams all retired at the first corner. So, looking at the championship standings, and Oscar Piastri does still lead the table going into race 2 tomorrow. Oscar Piastri it is that leads, ahead of Teo Porcher, who is now up to second. It's a 19-point gap that Piastri has. Sargent is in third, then it's Verschoor, then it is Vesti, who's been quite unlucky this year, it has to be said. And then you have David Beckman, who has reverse grid pole tomorrow. And I think it's going to be quite hard to beat him tomorrow, because when you put him at the front, he rarely looks back. So I could easily see Beckman easily taking the win tomorrow. So that was the Formula 3 race, and now you have the Formula 2 race. At the end of the day, you had the Formula 2 race. Which took place around half an hour to an hour ago. I was supposed to do this stream straight after it had finished, but because of the technical issues that I had, that didn't happen. But at the start of the race, Eilert held the lead into the first corner. But the likes of Ticktum and Schwartzman made very good starts. Ticktum got up to second, Schwartzman up to 6th from 11th. This was really where was crucial for his race in the end. But there was chaos, because then you had the two Tridents coming together after Nissany went into the first corner all locked up and then smashed into his teammate Marino Sato. Both were out of the race. Both cars had to instantly park up with most likely suspension damage. I mean, Nissany had obvious suspension damage. Not sure what damage, it wasn't quite clear what damage Sato had, but he was with most likely suspension damage as well. Going to be an awkward debrief at Trident. Then the safety car came in. Then you had an incident as Luca Giotto and Christian Lundgaard came together. It seems like Giotto did kind of move across, but there was no action taken in the end on this incident. Then there was chaos because as Lundgaard tried to make his way back to the pits, he was in the middle of the pack, and then in avoiding his slowing car, Marcus Armstrong went into Artem Markarov, and that was the result. He went into the wall. It was an unlucky incident where all three cars were out of the race. Safety car was needed again, and then the safety car was Ticktum immediately pitted. And then Eilert followed a lap later. But the overcut once again seemed to be really good in F2, because as you can see, then you had Luca Giotto exiting the pits, and he almost managed to beat Callum Eilert. Mick Schumacher actually did initially beat him, but then Eilert managed to get past. But Robert Schwartzman was on the alternate strategy, and this was where the job was done for, in my opinion, for him. He was managing the mediums expertly and going at the same pace as those who'd switched to mediums mid-race and had been on them for half the distance that he had, because Schwartzman had been on them at the start. It was incredible. Whilst others were struggling to even conserve the medium tyres past around 10 laps, he had been on, having switched to them. He'd been on the medium tyres to start with and managed to get them a whopping 27 laps before he pitted. But back at the front, Mick Schumacher then managed to get past Callum Eilert to take the lead. He managed to overcut many drivers, and then he took the lead from Eilert. But then on lap 27, Schwartzman pitted for the soft compound tyre, and he exited. He had a real lockup, which is really his only mistake. But he went alongside. He initially lost out to Giotto, but then he managed to pass Giotto and Eilert in a very short space of time. And then it took him only a lap to close the gap to Mick Schumacher, which was around 2.5 seconds. And he managed to get past and then disappeared off for the lead and disappeared off. And the alternate strategy was working for so many others as well. You saw Deruvala making his way through the field. And then you had Nikita Mazepin, who was on the alternate strategy, who fought his way up to second. As you can see, this is him. He made a really nice overtake around the outside of turn 4 on Mick Schumacher. But it was Robert Schwartzman who I think showed himself as a star of the future. I think this is the race that people are going to be looking to in the future as the race that defined a star of the future. It was an incredible drive from Robert Schwartzman, and he is more than deserving. So far, in just 3 weekends, he has shown himself to be more than deserving of a Formula 1 drive for 2021. And he leads the standings by 22 points now. If you look at the results, it was Schwartzman that won ahead of Callum Eilert in second. Not Callum Eilert in second. It was Schwartzman that won had Nikita Mazepin in second. Nikita Mazepin, his performance was underrated, I think, and overshadowed by Robert Schwartzman, because you can't take anything away from him. His drive was very good as well, finishing in second on the alternate strategy from 16th on the grid. Then you had Mick Schumacher finishing in third, a good day for Prima, and then you had Luca Giotto finishing in fourth. So it was Prima High-Tech. Then you had Drugovich and Duruvela, who made the alternate strategy work. Then you had Delatrez, who finished in seventh. Callum Ilott struggled. He dropped to eighth. He really struggled with tyres at the end, but he still has reverse grid pole and has a good chance of winning tomorrow. Then you had Dan Ticktum and Guan Yusu, who both struggled on the tyres. Then you had Alesi, Matsushita, Aitken, PK, Samaya, Tsunoda, Galeo, and the retirements were Lundgaard, Armstrong, Markelov, Sato, and Nissany. So that was the Formula 2 race. So what to expect tomorrow? Overtaking is not going to be easy, and I think it's going to be very hard to stop Mercedes. But there's going to be the fight for the final podium position that is going to be very, very interesting. Can Racing Point fend the likes of Red Bull, Ferrari, and everyone else off? I think there's every chance they could. I think Racing Point have a really good chance of a podium tomorrow. It would be their first podium since 2018. And I think the interest is going to be in the battle for third. Red Bull will likely be quicker in the race tomorrow, and also we know that McLaren have good race pace. So the battle for that final podium position is going to be very interesting. But it's probably going to be quite hard to beat Lewis Hamilton. He's really good at this track, and I think it's going to be quite tough to beat him. But I think tomorrow it's a question of who's going to take that final space on the podium. So, thank you very much for watching the Saturday recap here for the Hungarian Grand Prix, and we will see you tomorrow for the race recap on what should hopefully be an interesting Hungarian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.